Welcome back to the front porch, everybody. I wanted to ask today, are there any comic creators that you would like to see come back that maybe haven't done anything in a long time? You know, I get nostalgic sometimes. I guess it's because I'm getting older. But there's a lot of creators back in the day that I really enjoyed their stuff. David Michelinie had a long run on Amazing Spider-Man. You get to see, who else? Mark Bagley was a great artist on Amazing Spider-Man for quite a long while. Trying to think who else back in the day. You know, of course, Alan Moore, Steve Bissette, John Totleben. There's always, as you get older, there's these creators that have kind of retired, gone by the wayside. They don't get the phone calls, the emails, the respect anymore from the new editors because the editors just see them as old hat. So, do you think that the new crop of artists and writers and creatives that are coming up, do you think they are as well put together to put these comic books, in our hands? Or do you think that we should go back and call some of these writers back up and some of these artists back up to the monthlies and the big leagues if that's what they want to do? A lot of them, kind of like, unfortunately, George Perez, he's passed on, and, he got sick, and he couldn't do what he did before. So I understand that some of those creators are physically incapable of coming back and creating at a high enough level for them to be successful. It's kind of like that situation with John Cassaday where everybody was laughing at his last artwork, or one of his last artworks, and they're like, my God, he can't even draw. And then you come to find out he dies. Maybe he was trying to provide for his family one last time. Maybe that particular image took everything that he had left in the tank just to make it look as good as it did. But there's still a lot of creators that are out there. Like, I'd love to see Jerry Ordway on a monthly book if he wants to do it, or at least get him out there and have him do a 5 or 6 issue run on a Captain Marvel book, Shazam book. Get him out there and let him do a 5 or 6 parter on Superman. Bring Dan Jurgens back onto Superman if he wants to be on that book. That's the other part. Not to hijack this thread, but I saw the other day that you had the DC blackout because they were saying that there were no mainline DC books that were, black-led by characters. And the only thing I'm going to say about that, because I've had time to think about it, is what if there are no creators out there that are pitching these characters? Maybe it's not an issue of DC not wanting to publish a book with a black lead, but instead maybe it's just the fact that there's no, African-American creators, or even, creators of a different nature that want to create with these characters. Does anybody, and he's a white character, but does anybody really want to try to do a long run on Ben Reilly? Does anybody want to try to do a long run on some random character that you get from a series back in the 1970s? Okay, let's just go back to like a random issue of Adventure Comics from the 1970s. And let's say that you take one of those characters. Okay, let's say that you take one of those characters from the Spectre series that they did in the 1970s. And let's say that you take somebody that the Spectre is going to kill in that Michael Fleischer and Jim Aparo series. And instead, through a twist of fate, luck, God smiling down on him, whatever it is, instead he decides that he's going to turn his life around. And for whatever reason, the Spectre can't find him to mete out that vengeance that he so badly wants to give. Okay? Let's say that character becomes one of DC's highest profile characters. for about a 5-year, stint. But then the character falls into obscurity and then falls into a hole. How many creators 30 years later, 40 years later, 50 years later, whether they're white, black, or otherwise, are going to show up and say, man, that guy had the greatest 25-issue run of any black superhero at DC. Let's get that man a new series. And they're going to pour 110% into something that they didn't create just so that they can say that they wrote for DC or Marvel. Now, I'm not saying that writing for DC or Marvel is the devil, okay? And if I ever get this comic book off the ground and for whatever reason I get called up, to write a Spider-Man mini or something like that, I'm not going to tell them to go fly a kite because they're Marvel or, I'm not like that. The point I'm trying to say is it's about creators' rights, okay? And maybe these creators, again, no matter their ethnicity, don't want to give away some of their greatest ideas, some of their strongest ideas to a machine that will continue to respawn that story decades after they're dead. Okay? So maybe that's where some of the cynicism comes in for these old creators, is they say, I don't want to go back and write for Marvel or DC because I don't want to give them my greatest ideas. And then they go and run with them 30 and 40 years after I'm dead, create a movie out of them, and then my family sees zero benefit from the pain and suffering that I had to go through in order to create. So what do you guys think? To circle back around to the main objective here of this video, it's not the DC blackout, but it's the fact, do you think that, creators have gotten older and like Larry Hama, he said that he will have to work until the day he dies, which is extremely sad. I know that he loves those characters of G.I. Joe, but for him to not be able to sit down and retire and spend time with his family and his grandkids and things like that in the way that he would love to do, I'm sure, simply because he hasn't made enough money in his life in order to do it. And we're talking a guy who's in his late 70s now. Come on, man. Somebody, Marvel, throw him a bone. Image, throw him a bone, and let the man retire. And I'm not saying that Robert Kirkman should pull it out of his own pocket, but if you've made, let's say, $1 million, and I know that he's made multi-millions of dollars, but let's say he's made $1 million, that he's doing absolutely nothing with, that he could go help out a creator. Give Larry a $250,000 bonus or something, just for his long-standing creativity, his long-standing love for these characters. Give him something big, and then, I'm not saying put Larry out to pasture, but I'm saying give him something big enough that, if he wants to end G.I. Joe with issue 350 or 400 or wherever he wants to stop, let the man rest. Let him go and spend his last good years that he has his health with his family. So it's kind of a double-edged sword. Where do you guys fall on this? Do you think we should, dust off the boxes and bring out some of the older creators and bring them back, even if they're going to be a little bit crustier and not so, politically correct anymore? Or do you think that we should, give them a send-off, a proper send-off with respect and with gratis, and allow them to, walk off into the sunset with their family and not have to worry about bills and medical bills and money, and they don't have to come back and write 5 titles a month just to make sure that their medical bills are paid. So just some food for thought while I'm sitting out here on the porch listening to these birds. You guys let me know what you think in the comments. Have a wonderful Saturday, and I will catch you later.